Is UFC 300 or is it stacked? Before we get into that, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe as we have brand new videos every single week. At the time of recording, the main event has not been announced, but knowing our luck, the second this video gets uploaded, Dana will announce it.
That's your problem, not mine.
But Mark, it seems that they are hunting for a main event. And we've said before, we're happy with this card as it is, to be honest. We don't think it needs that main event. But what do you think a realistic main event could be for UFC 300?
I think it's got to be Ian Garriott versus his wife's boyfriend. Look, it's going to sell. It's going to put asses in seats. I think that people are going to be interested. We want to know who is the king of Cook. And I think that is what it's going to sell for UFC 300, in all honesty.
Right. Well, I'll give a realistic.
Oh yeah. To be fair, he's fighting at UFC 298, so it probably ain't going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too quick a turnaround. Too quick a turnaround. But like we were saying a second ago, with the main event, this card's great already, isn't it? You could just have Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway be that main event, and I think most of us would be happy. But I think if we are going to get a main event, it's going to be either Alex Pereira or Israel Adesanya, either facing each other or facing someone else. I think they're kind of the only two reasonable title shots you could put in this. You know, either it's Izzy versus Alex at 205, or it's Izzy versus DDP, or it's Alex versus Jamal Hill. I think those three options are probably the only realistic fights we could get because, you know, they've said, oh, it could be Leon versus Bilal, but Bilal won't be ready either because it'll be Ramadan. The same problem with Islam Makhachev and all the other champions have just fought. And, you know, unless Aspinall just fights Cyril Gane or something silly like that, but it's not good enough to main event, is it?
Well, no, that's what I think as well. I think the only realistic option is something in the light heavyweight division. And I think Jamal Hill versus Alex Pereira could work. But then you go, well, would they warrant being the main event over Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway? Yeah. Doesn't matter if it makes sense. It's another title shot in this big light heavyweight division. And let's face it, look, Alex Pereira is a monster and sweet dreams Jamal Hill. Who wouldn't want to see that fight? Does it warrant the main event? Who really cares? We're getting a stacked event. And I think people need to just, honestly, just shut up and be grateful, to be honest, because this event is stacked from beginning to end. Honestly,
yeah.
Like, I don't know what people expect. Do they expect, I don't know, the comeback of the century or something like that? It's not WWE. These are real fights, and we've got super fights all up and down the card.
Yeah, well, that brings me on to my next point, though, isn't it? I think a lot of people seem disappointed with UFC 300. But do you think their expectations are a little bit too high? And what did they think was going to happen on this card, right?
Well, of course they are. I mean, like, look, you got to... Look, UFC 300 is stacked from start to finish. And what more could someone expect? You've got, what is it, like 5 or 6 former champions on there?
Eight former champions.
8. See, you've got all them... You've got, say, let's just pick one at random. Charles Oliveira's fighting, isn't he? That would be a main event on any other card, but it's nowhere near. He's on the main card, but it's nowhere near the main event. So that's how stacked this is. You've got to look at who's on the card, what they bring to the table, what credentials they have, what resume they have. Look at Max Holloway. His resume is ridiculous. He's going up in a weight class yet again to fight one of the most violent lightweights there ever has been in Justin Gaethje. What's going to happen? You've got the silly belt, but, you know, take that aside. Just there's still going to be blood and guts and gore everywhere.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? And, you know, you've perfectly segued me onto there, Mark. Let's talk about the people's main event. Max Holloway will be facing Justin Gaethje for obviously the most prestigious belt in all combat sports, the BMF title. But, you know, jokes aside, do you think getting multiple defenses in for this belt will make it more prestigious? Because it felt like, you know, when Masvidal had it, he won it and then we never saw it again, did we? Whereas it feels like Justin could go on a bit of a run with this.
Well, it's a bit of a trophy belt if you don't defend it like that, isn't it? And it's just something that they wheel out to make a main event seem a bit more interesting. If you do get defenses of it, it could be really interesting. And then it opens up so many more opportunities as well. You go, well, is there going to be a BMF belt in other weight classes? What's going to happen? And it brings, you know, prestige. I didn't even think of that before. It brings prestige to it, maybe. If you get some good defenses, you know, I think that this could really, really amp up the interest in fights in general. And you look at who's fighting for it? You got Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway. I hate the word BMF just because it's so corny, but if there's anyone deserving, these two are the one, you know.
Yeah, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think the big problem is, I think Justin seems to talk about the BMF belt as though it's the interim title, doesn't it? And it's not that. You know, he keeps talking about that. Well, I deserve a title shot next. I deserve this. But in some ways, it's hard to kind of disagree with him, isn't it? If Justin beats Max, do you think his next fight should be for the real 155 gold against Islam Makhachev?
I think he definitely deserves it. You look at his last fight; he knocked out Dustin Poirier. Who look, I know you're not a big fan of Dustin, but to knock him out like that in that fashion is just you can't argue against that, can you? It's just
No.
fantastic. And then to beat, granted, is a featherweight, but to beat Max Holloway, and he doesn't have long left in his career. Justin, he said after the Rafael Fiziev fight, doesn't he? He said, "I'll probably have one more run at the title, and that's probably me." And it makes sense. This fight of Islam versus Justin hasn't happened.
Yeah.
If he gets through Max, 100%, this is a clear-cut path for another title shot. Don't know if it'd go his way, but he's got to get through Max Holloway first. So anything could happen.
Yeah, it really can. And I'm super excited for this fight. I think a lot of people are writing Max off a bit too quick, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks' time when we do our predictions. So on the flip side, though, Mark, if Max wins this, where does that put him? Could you see him coming up and fighting Islam Makhachev for the title, or do you think he could go back down and secure himself another title shot with Volk?
I think that cements him as a serious lightweight contender. I
Yeah,
think if he gets through Justin Gaethje, I think featherweight, no more. Let's come on. He's beaten everyone there. We've said for a while now, he couldn't beat Volkanovski. He had 3 opportunities to do so. I don't care what you think the judges thought. If you think you got it wrong, he didn't. He didn't
yeah,
beat him 3 times. He's beaten everyone else. He's just in featherweight doing side quests. Let's get Max up in lightweight. Let's open up the division to have so many more interesting matches. The possibility, Dwayne, imagine Max Holloway versus Michael Chandler or Charles Oliveira, something like that. Like, your eyes light up like Christmas morning as a child then. But then it opens up so many more divisions. Max is only young. He's still got a good few years left in him.
yeah.
And look at the
He
resume
really
he's got
does.
already.
Yeah, you forget how young Max is. It's because he's been in the sport for such a long time and been so active. I think he's only like 32, isn't he? 33 at the most.
Something like that,
He's
yeah.
super young. He's got a good 2, 3 years left at least. So Mark, now let's move on to my favorite fighter, Zhang Weili. He's fighting Yan Xianan. And as fun as this fight will be, do you think we could have had a bigger fight for Zhang, especially on 300? You know, there was rumors of a super fight with her versus Alexa Grasso. Do you think that would have been more fitting than this fight?
I think it would have been more fun to see, but I think she's got to finish this chapter in this weight division.
Yeah.
This closes it out. This is probably the only other fight in that weight division that I'm actually keen to see. It's China versus China, isn't it? The first time ever.
Yeah.
In the women's division anyway, and it's Zhang Weili versus Yan Xianan, and Yan Xianan is no joke. The work that she's put in, she deserves this. Better than the last one. Who was Zhang's last fight against? Can't even remember the way where it was
Amanda
just
Lemos.
oh my god, it were an absolute mauling. But this one just makes a lot more sense, and I'm actually excited to see it as the co-main event. Doesn't really matter. It's a championship fight, and Zhang Weili always brings it. I know that she's your favorite fighter, Dwayne. I think we've established, but
Yeah.
she can knock people out. She can submit them. She can lay on them. She can batter the shite out of someone for 5 rounds. We've seen that all before. It makes for a perfect recipe for a co-main event, I think.
Yeah, it really, really does. And it seems like there's a lot of fans complaining that there's too many women's fights on UFC 300. But I think that's absolutely ridiculous. You've got Zhang Weili, probably one of the most exciting female fighters on the roster. You've got Jessica Andrade, who always puts on an entertaining fight. And then you've got Kayla Harrison, who's built like Brock Lesnar. She is massive. Like, this is her debut. This is going to be incredibly exciting. And I think it's such a shame that so many fans are just complaining about all this. I think these are great fights, right?
Yeah, these are I think the fans that are complaining about this kind of stuff are the ones who expect Brock Lesnar himself to come back, Daniel Cormier to come out of retirement, and fucking Chuck Liddell to come out and have one last run. Like their expectations are so high. You look at who they are and who the credentials are. Like you say, you got Jessica Andrade in there, win, lose or draw. Her fights are always exciting. She always brings it. She's a machine, isn't she? Let's
Yeah.
face it. We've got, like you say, Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison, China from WWF. You know, like, so I think I'm half expecting a military press and just throw her out of the cage. But that's the thing. There's an interesting point. It's a spectacle, isn't it? Because you're like, she's a beast and this is her debut in the UFC. What's going to happen? So there's an interesting point there. It's not just some unranked strawweight fight that you just get thrown in. Again, I think fans are just so ungrateful sometimes. And they just sat there, they're just rubbishing people who, quite honestly, deserve this shot.
Yeah, and it's such a shame. I think, unfortunately, that's just the way UFC fans often are, aren't they? It's constantly like, well, I want more, I want more, I want more. And it's like, this is almost a perfect card. I think it maybe genuinely is a perfect card, right? It's
Yeah.
stacked, really, really is. And to be complaining that there's too many women's fights, especially when these three fights are so fantastic, I genuinely find ridiculous. But anyway, opening the card, we have Oliveira versus Arman and Yuri versus Rakic. Do you think both of these fights are probably going to be title eliminators?
They have to be, don't they? They've got to be. You see, Oliveira's last performance when he doesn't pull out, and then you've got Yuri Prohaska. He's hungry for that title shot again, and to get through Alexander Rakic after being finished by Alex Pereira in the second round, it has to be for the eliminator, doesn't it? Like we said, depending, we might even get the main event announced of maybe a lightweight or light heavyweight title fight. Who knows? I don't know. But to have the title eliminator on that same card, it fits perfectly, doesn't it? I know people can get injured, but if they're both fighting on the same card, you think, oh well, it might line up for a good fight in the summer.
Yeah.
It can really complement it here. I think it has to be just with who these people are. It really does open up that division for right. You're probably next for a title shot, including for Rakic and Turishin, however you say his name, who's fighting Oliveira. It really does, because if he can get through Oliveira, or if Rakic can get through Prohaska, it does wonders for their career as well. How are people complaining about this card?
It's insane, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. And look how stacked this card is. We're only just talking about Charles Oliveira so far into the video and Yuri. And you've got these two former champions not even in the core or main event. They're literally opening up the card. It's insane, isn't it? And it just goes to show, like, look at the prelims, Matt. Look how stacked they are. You've got people like Bobby Green, Jim Miller, Andrade, Holly Holm, Kayla Harrison, Cody Garbrandt, Fedorino, Bo Nickel, Calvin Kattar, and Aljamain Sterling. I'm getting out of breath saying them. There's that many of them. Like, you could put almost any of these fights and make them a pay-per-view. Like, just the prelims alone, that is a pay-per-view card. If you put a bit of gold on there, that's it. You're laughing. And it just sort of proves how big UFC 300 really is, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, like, literally, you just reeled off those names there. When you say, just for a quick example, Aljamain Sterling on the prelims, his last fight was the main event, and he was the champion, and he's now on the prelims, moving up in weight class. Don't get me wrong, against Calvin Kattar, isn't it? You're like, so he's got a lot to prove in this division, and see what he can do. There's so many fights. It's gonna be a long night in the UK. We'll put it that way for us. Gonna be sat there. I'll have plenty of these. I'll have to get the matchsticks in the eyes. And yeah, I can't miss a single fight on this card.
No, you can't. And I think that just shows how good 300 is, isn't it? Because normally you and I, unfortunately, we've got lives. So we tend to sleep through the prelims and the early prelims because you just can't you just can't stay up that late. So you wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, watch your favorite fighter get battered in the middle of the night, go back to sleep crying. Whereas this, we have to watch the whole card. It shows how huge it actually is, isn't it? And sort of, Mike, out of these prelim fights, which one are you looking forward to the most?
I might be a little fanboy here, but I've always been a big fan of Cody Garbrandt, and I think Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueiredo, that's a dream fight for me. It's Davison coming up in weight against Cody Garbrandt. When Garbrandt turns it on, he is Cody Garbrandt. Other than that, when he just gets knocked, like when he rushes in, it reminds me of Anakin from Star Wars, where he's got all the credentials, he's got the tools, but he lets his emotions get the better of him, and then he ends up looking up, counting stars. Davison Figueiredo will not let him rush in. He will, he's clean, he's precise, he's the champion, ex-champion for a reason. So's Cody Garbrandt.
Mm.
I think this is one that you don't want to miss. It could either end quickly or it's going to be a 3-round absolute war. And I don't think there's much middle ground in there. What about you? Is there any fights that you're ridiculously interested in?
You've literally just said the one I was going to say, Mark. I am incredibly excited for Figgy versus Cody. It's going to be so fun, especially if Cody turns up. If Cody turns up, we are in for a battle, and I cannot wait. But UFC 300 is stacked from the top to the bottom, and it is genuinely such an exciting card. Thank you for watching. If you can like, comment, and subscribe, it really does help us out.